Oba, nya.
Dans la peau, dans la peau, dans la peau.
Oba, nya. Oba, nya. Oba, nya.
Ils ont la samba dans la peau, dans la peau, dans la peau.
Welcome, everyone. I am Dennis Edson, and it is a new year, folks. I think an ancient proverb once said that the new year actually officially does not begin until the first developer hug event happens. And that's happening today, right now. So happy new year. Enjoy the festivities. Let's get going. Welcome to the Developer Hug. We are going to talk about accessibility today, building a more accessible web experience in 2025. Got an exciting cast ahead of us, and we are going to talk about, well, actually, next event. Because it's a new year, I'm trying to be a little bit better about scheduling things. So up already is the next event where we're going to be talking about technical SEO and web performance. That should be a good one. And that date is totally wrong. I will update that as well. So I have a lot of things to improve over the new year. Okay, let's bring in the characters. We have a lot of people talking today. We got Toon, we got John, we got Brooke, we got Tanya, and we got Anton. All going to be talking about some really cool things. First, I want to give it over to the agenda, which is 5 minutes of Brooke talking, 5 minutes of Tune telling us why we want to talk about accessibility. 15 minutes or so of John talking about some accessibility tools in the HubSpot. 15 minutes of Tanya saying, wait, John, there's more out there. I got some external tools to talk about. Then Anton saying, yo, let's have some code. Here you go. And then last but not least, we've got a little roundtable where we're going to discuss all the questions you all have, as well as some that I have for these very, very smart people. So with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Brooke. So come on up stage, Brooke, and I'm going to leave.
All right, sounds good. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am super excited about today's topic. I am really into accessibility and making sure that all of our websites out there are accessible to everyone, no matter what ability they have. But actually, what I'm going to be talking about today is our developer changelog, which went live yesterday. So if you want to check out January's rollup, please go ahead and scan that QR code up on the screen, or you can use that bit.ly link right there, and that will take you to all of our changelogs that we have on the developer's website. So let me go quickly through some of the updates that we have for this month. First, we have enhanced app usage insights. This feature has now been enhanced to include improved reporting capabilities for developers by providing detailed aggregate data on how app users interact with your app in HubSpot. And this data goes beyond the previous 30-day log limits and includes insights into specific user activities. And if you want to see these insights, just go to the Marketplace app listing section of your portal, select your app, and then you can review the activity data by date range and operation type. So learn more at the bit.ly below. Next, we also have more stuff about our apps. This is a new app usage tab for API monitoring. This tab will allow you to track and understand your API usage patterns, offering insights into customer engagement with your app's functionality. And you can filter this usage data by date range, and the detailed metrics include the date of the API calls, the specific endpoints requested, and the number of successful calls without errors. Additionally, you can export this data so you can do what you want. Check out the link to learn more about app usage tab. We also are introducing, this is all for the app partners out there, y'all. We've got so many app updates. This is introducing our new 2-year app certification cycle. So what this means is that you will need to renew your app on a 2-year cycle, and you'll receive a notification 3 months before your app's certification expires, which should give you time to update your app and go through the recertification process. We are also launching some new developer tools later this year, which will help to streamline this renewal process, including step-by-step guidance, status tracking, and seamless submissions. So if you're a little worried about that, don't worry. Here's some next steps for you. First, mark your app's expiration date and prepare your updates early. Secondly, use the 3-month notification as a reminder to start your renewal process. Don't wait till the last minute. Make sure that you're getting them in early, and stay tuned for those developer portal updates so that we can simplify your certification management. Next, this is for everyone who are using our app cards beta and the legacy CRM cards. The classic CRM cards can now be hidden for new installations. So in addition to using the Feature Flags API to roll out app cards to your install base, you can also use it to facilitate the removal of classic CRM cards by setting the HS Hide CRM cards flag. So for example, with existing installs, you may want to continue showing the old cards to remind users to upgrade to your new cards, then hide them from new installs and accounts that have already upgraded. So check out the app cards docs to learn more how to use this flag and how to get people starting to use your new app cards instead of your legacy CRM cards. And our last update is for the Invoices API beta. Previously, this API was only limited to read-only access, but now we're going to introduce some new beta endpoints that enable users to create invoices for customer payments. This latest public beta will facilitate a smoother invoicing process by automating invoice creation, integrating with other systems for creating invoices in HubSpot, and reducing errors associated with manual data entry for invoices. So make sure to check out the Invoices API docs for all of those new endpoints that are available for this API. And if you have any comments, please leave them in the chat. And now I will hand it over to Tuan.
Thank you, Brooke. Those were some amazing updates. So we're talking about accessibility today, but let's start with what is accessibility. Now, to give you an example, consider an accessible entrance to buildings. Railing ramps, you have self-operating doors, you have signs, lighting, even the width and height of steps are all things that you have to take into account to design an accessible entrance. Each function can increase, improve, or even eliminate a barrier to a person's access to a building or structure. And these are all tools to make sure that an entrance is accessible. But this is applying to buildings and non-digital examples. But what about the web? To make it short, accessibility is the practice of making information, activities, and/or environments sensible, meaningful, and usable for as many people as possible. Now, in Europe, something interesting is happening because Europe is going to enforce accessibility, which is a great improvement, but also something that we have to keep in mind. They are doing this by the European Accessibility Act, and it is a regulation aimed at ensuring people with disabilities so they can access goods and services, including many types of digital experience, without barriers. It was originally already enacted in 2019, but mainly focused on governmental organizations. Starting in half of 2025, the European Accessibility Act will also apply to a lot of regular companies as well. It will mainly apply to businesses operating in key sectors such as banking, transport, telecommunications, e-commerce, and consumer electronics. The European Accessibility Act sets harmonized accessibility standards for new products and services introduced after 2025. But to learn if this new law will apply to you or your clients, make sure to do your own research. Now, to talk a bit about the scope of the European Accessibility Act that will be applied in 2025, you have to understand that they will encompass several key areas. And the most significant of these are digital accessibility, and this will involve businesses that fall under the purview of the Accessibility Act. Again, ensuring accessibility across websites and digital services. So they align with the principles set out by the WCAG, which is short for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It will apply to audiovisual media accessibility, banking accessibility, and assistive technologies, but also electronic communication. The Accessibility Act enforces the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 specifically. However, this is mainly the legal mandatory baseline. If you are interested to make your digital services or products even more accessible, there is also a 2.2 version published, which will allow you to take another step of making your digital products more accessible. Now, on the website of wo3.org, they are showcasing some amazing user stories of real people, and they give a great example on how they are struggling with digital services that aren't accessible. And I would quickly like to go through a few of them with you together. For example, we have Aid, and Aid is a reporter with limited use of his arms. Now, the things that Aid is struggling with is when he's tabbing through links and form fields, there is no visual styling to show him which element he is on. So imagine you have a form and you do not have a mouse available to go through the form. You're not sure which element you are currently on. So a thing that you could apply in this case is making sure that you have strong visual styling available for links, but also form fields to make sure that, in this case, Abe knows where he is in your form when filling it out. Another example is that completing long forms can be a bit of a hassle if there is not a way to save the progress in the meantime. So imagine that you cannot use your arms like we probably all can do, and you have to use a joystick to fill out a form. That can be quite a hassle and could take some time. So if you have a really long form and not the option to save your progress during the process of filling out the form, that is not accessible at all. Another great example in this case is, let's say that we have a website, and I think this is the most basic example, right? But for some good reason, we have pop-ups applied on our website. Now, if you do not have a good use of your arms, a pop-up can be a terrible thing, as long as it isn't applied with accessibility in mind. Because imagine you have a pop-up that opens, but you do not have your mouse to simply close it. Then you need an accessible component inside the pop-up to make sure it's easy to close this. For example, this could be a close icon that is accessible either through the keyboard or to another option to press the escape button, for example, to close it. Now, there are many different people with disabilities that we need to keep in mind when creating an accessible digital experience. So, for example, if we have a visitor who is blind, we need to make sure that our website is also available through a screen reader, for example, right? But something else that we have to keep in mind, for example, if a person is blind, is the fact that they cannot control things on websites such as buttons and links. They can hear them, but they can't press them. So what we need to do when making an accessible digital experience is we need to make sure that the keyboard is available to navigate through things on our website. And another thing is that if we are applying a specific structure on a few pages, we need to make sure that that is enforced throughout our whole website. Because if we have the same navigation elements on the same place of our pages, it will allow a much better user experience for people who are limited and need to use the keyboard to navigate throughout your website. Now, if you are interested in reading more user stories of people who need an accessible digital experience, make sure to visit the w3.org website. Now, a lot of talk about what accessibility is. But let's move ahead on how you can apply it. So now I'll pass the mic to John, who will give us some great examples.
Thank you, Toon. That was a lot of good information. So as Toon alluded, Tanya and I will be talking to you about practical tools available to you. And HubSpot provides you multiple tools to make it easier to deliver a more accessible experience on your website. HubSpot's theme boilerplate, which I have on the left here, default themes and default modules have been designed with accessibility in mind, giving you a great starting point. Aside from our default modules, themes, and boilerplate, we also bake in some tools directly into HubSpot itself. From setting alt text on an image right in your content, as well as adding alt text in the Files tool itself. If you set alt text in the Files tool, the next time that image gets used, it will automatically pull that alt text. You might ask yourself, well, if I can set the alt text in the Files tool and it appears everywhere that image gets used, why set it in the page editor? Well, the reason is simple. In the Files tool, the image is without any surrounding context. So typically, the text will be written directly stating what's in the image, but may not be talking about what's actually most important in the image based on where the image is getting used. In the Files tool, my alt text here is Cloudgate or the Bean in Chicago, reflecting the skyline and trees in Millennium Park. My alt text, however, on this date night blog post is John and his wife look tiny in the reflection of Chicago's Cloudgate. The image in another context, say weather.com, could read, a gloomy rainy day in Chicago's Millennium Park keeps couples away, for a post about Valentine's Day and the weather. All of those image descriptions are totally valid, But based on the context, the subject of the photo was different, and the details that are considered important are also different. Just like the description can change, whether you should use alt text can also be different based on the situation. So 1 second. For example, say you're doing a conference and you have a listing of speakers and all of the photos have everyone with their arms crossed. Well, that's not something you really care to repeat and describe for everybody. It'd just be noise. However, if you're looking at like an individual person's talk, and let's just say it's like about civil rights, and the photo of the speaker is actually like a historic photo of them at an important civil rights event, then providing alt text in that case would add a lot of value and meaning for the screen reader user. Aside from images, you can also host videos on HubSpot. And if you host, wow, I misclicked there. All right, 1 second. All right, let me back up a little bit. Okay. All right, well, we support setting a title for your video. This will show up on screen readers as well as to search engines as well. You can also provide subtitles, and we support what is called video text track format. Had to look that up quick. And then general, I wanted to point this out. It's not quite an accessibility thing. It's more accessibility feature for AI than it is for people. But we also have a new feature in the files tool for videos where we automatically will generate a description of your video as well as keywords. And basically, those are used so that Breeze AI can then quickly understand what video you're referring to if you were talking to it about videos that you have in your files tool. Again, they're not exactly shown externally, they're for AI. But one more HubSpot tool is the SEO recommendations tool. If you've never used it, it gives you all kinds of useful insights on how to improve your site's ranking based on technical issues and non-technical issues with your site. Included, though, are some accessibility tests. You can filter out your specific categories that you care about right there. And you'll also notice that these are powered by Google Lighthouse. If you use the Google PageSpeed Insight tool, which is Google Lighthouse as well, it's also built into your browser too. You can get a report that shows even more accessibility tests. These shouldn't be seen as I didn't get any accessibility errors in my test, so I must have a perfect accessibility for my whole site. No, these tests are for easy to automatically and accurately detect accessibility issues. They won't catch everything, but they will give you a starting point and help you catch things that might not be easy to catch manually. Speaking of more manual testing, I think it's now time to pass off the mic to Tanya, who has some more advanced accessibility testing tools to show you.
Thanks, John. I'll wait for my screen to come up. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about some tooling that lives externally from HubSpot. And I'm going to highlight a singular tool today that I really like personally and has served me well over the years when I'm doing any accessibility testing. And I want to make it so that you get an introduction to this tool so you can see how easy it is to get started and dive into your website and also learn more about accessibility while you're recording issues to remediate. And especially if you're in the EU and you're needing to prepare for the European Accessibility Act and the upcoming regulations, this is a great way just to kind of get started and learn along the way. So the tool that I want to talk about today is this Axe DevTools. It's a Chrome extension. It comes from the company DQ, And I'll talk about DQ a little bit more in depth later. I am not affiliated with DQ in any way. I'm going to talk about DQ a lot. I really love them as a company. I think they offer a lot of great resources, including this tool. But let's look at this tool in particular and see how to use it a little bit. Let's get our hands dirty on that, and then we can just talk a little bit more about tooling and maybe different setups that developers have. So Chrome, it's available. It's for free. There is a pro version of it. I'll talk about that again later. But let's look at the free version and see what we can get out of it. So I have it installed, and we're right now, I spun up a empty like template page. I didn't put any custom content in here. And this is actually using the HubSpot Elevate theme, which is newer. And so I haven't done any setup here. So you'll see we're in the Axe Dev Tools tab of our Dev Console here. And I have a pro version. So if you were to download this, you'll see a bunch of like little yellow locks on these other features. But the tool that you actually have access to will be a full page scan. So let's run that on this page and see what we get. So that was quick enough. We actually have two issues that have popped up. One of them is a document that has the document should have a title element, and the other one is heading should not be empty. So this screen and interface gives us a little bit of information about what's going on. Down in the left here, you can see that it is tracking to the WCAG 2.1 AA standards. And I think that's important because as we're talking about the EAA, the European Accessibility Act, AA is usually the recommended level that you want to track to in order to remediate issues. So we are looking at AA. That's great. I do have best practices on. That is coming from DQ. You can turn that off, but I recommend leaving it on. They have some great best practices. And then we can kind of start diving into some of these. It shows us that we have one serious and one minor. If we go into this first one, it gives us a little more information about the various elements of the page that this pertains to. If you have more than one of these issues popping up, you'll see this is actually a counter. And so you can kind of go through like an instance-based exploration of each of these. You can highlight nodes on the page. So if I click highlight, this is going to highlight the whole HTML because it's the HTML title. And you can actually look at this and it gives you instructions like this is what you need to do to solve the problem. So it's very straightforward. And if you feel like you want to learn more, why does it need a title? What's going on there? I need to learn more about WCAG, any of that kind of stuff. You can actually click this more information and it will take you straight out to DQ. And they really do a great job of kind of exploring this information, kind of taking WCAG. I think if there's anybody here who has ever looked at the WCAG guidelines, I feel like the WCAG guidelines, like once you get into it and you know how it's structured and how to read it, it becomes clear. But initially it can be quite an overwhelming document to follow. And so I think DQ does a great job of kind of just making it a little bit more simple and letting you know exactly how to remediate certain issues. And it gives you examples. It tells you why it matters. And it really puts it in perspective to what Toon was talking about people's experiences and what happens if you don't include a title or how they experience the page if this is missing. And then if you go down even further, again, you kind of go down this rabbit hole, totally up to you, but you can actually go into the WCAG and start looking at the techniques about that specific issue. And it gives you more information there. So that's like one of the things I really love about this tool. It kind of like sets you up to either do some quick actions, like let's just get this fixed, we need to get it done. And then if you have the opportunity to learn further, you can start kind of digging into certain things. So backing out of that, we'll go back to our little test here. And we'll look at this other one. Let's close that up. So heading should not be empty. And it looks like this is a company name logo. So if we highlight that, it's down here. Again, this is kind of on a portal that I've spun up. So I actually don't have a company name set. So this is empty. So this is actually not a really like a development problem. This is a content problem. And so I would say like, if you come across things like this, you can, if you're in HubSpot, you can tell your marketer, oh, you need to set a company name or some of this content's missing. We need to fill it in. And it just allows you to kind of separate some of those issues into, the various roles that you may have at your company. So that's a very simple example. So I'm going to move to a different page to kind of show if you have a a very robust page that you've built, you're kind of going back to it now and you want to look and see what's going on there, we can do that as well. So no hate on Barnes & Noble. That's my little disclaimer, no hate. But we'll do a full page scan here and see what we come up with. You can see like they have a lot of sliders and things like that on this page. There's a lot to analyze about what's going on here. So it might just take just a minute. Okay, so a lot more issues have appeared. And I think if you're a developer, and again, if you have a robust website, you might encounter this. And when you first encounter this, if you are not super familiar with accessibility and remediating issues, this might seem very overwhelming. And I want to just let you know that there's nothing to be worried about. We can get through this, right? This is not a big problem. Let's take a look a little deeper into what's going on here, and how you would go about addressing this. 239 issues. Where do I start? Okay, so let's take a look. We have 2 critical issues. We have 232 serious issues and 5 moderate and no minor. So if we take a look to the right, talking about those counters again, you can see there's 228 instances of this. ARIA hidden element must not be focusable or contain focusable elements. And if you kind of peruse through here, you can see, okay, they have a slick slider, and all of these things have to deal with the slick slider. So that actually gives us a good opportunity to fix a component. This could be a few lines of code, a fix somewhere that actually alters this entire component and how it behaves. And you have knocked out 228 issues off of this. So please don't be overwhelmed if you end up using this tool and you find all these issues. You really need to dive a little deeper and see like where is the root cause of some of these issues. And a lot of them can come from a component-based problem. And it could be a lot more minor than you think it is. So again, kind of using some of these highlighting tools, and maybe if you don't understand where it's on the page, here's a slick slider, and going down and saying, okay, well, I'd like to learn more about what exactly does it mean to fix this, and what should I do? And you can kind of see their examples and how they've remediated it, and what does that mean, and a bunch of resources, and you can just dive into and get exactly the fix that you need and take care of it. Right. And then just like another, minor filter, obviously if you click on some of these, you can get like straight to the critical issues. And that slick slider one is not even one of the critical ones. This one, there's 2 instances of these that you can kind of do in. This one's just alt text. Alt text is a very simple fix that comes up as critical that you can handle pretty easily. So I would just say, as you scan, please don't become overwhelmed. There's so much information out there, and a lot of these things can be easily handled as long as you track and keep positive about the situation. I think a lot of folks look at a number and they feel like it's too hard to overcome. So a note on this is automated testing. So in the world of accessibility, there's a lot of automated testing tools, but that doesn't handle many situations. To what Toon was talking about, a user that uses a joystick, or there is keyboard testing, actually listening to what a screen reader outputs and things like that. These are all manual testing that needs to still be done in addition to some of this automated testing to catch all of these items. And that I will save for a different talk that is a completely different avenue of learning how to do that effectively. But I think doing this and doing some automated testing will help catch a lot of issues. And to kind of like go back to, there's a free and there's a pro version of this this extension. They actually have started doing things inside of the extension where you have these interactive, like intelligent guided tests, where you can get a keyboard run through of your page, or you can look at interactive elements, or you can isolate certain components if you just want to retest on that specific one. So I would say it's beneficial to use Pro if you are somebody who really needs to remediate and make sure that you're following the WCAG AA for the EAA, or if you're heavily involved in accessibility in your organization. Pro is something that you might want to look into. They have a lot of nice features that really help kind of push that along, the remediation. And you're able to, with Pro, if you do a scan, export some of those tickets. And let's say you're using GitHub or other trackers, you can kind of easily start moving some of those over. So looking at Pro if you're interested in that. It is a little bit, I would say, it's not super affordable. I think it's like $50 a month if you want to be using Pro. So definitely like weigh that against what you need to be doing. I think free does take you a long way. And then I just wanted to show a couple other things before I finish up, which is that if you are interested in or have a need to have more tooling or recording of accessibility issues, Deque has an entire developer hub and suite and a bunch of different products. I'll show you some products inside of my portal here, but the extension itself, they have Developer Hub. Developer Hub has tools that will help you integrate with your, if you have like acceptance testing. They do have a linter, which is, they have a linter, and they also have integration into GitHub Actions for PRs. One caveat to that, is that those aren't super helpful in a Hubble-based world because you are working with Hubble and the Axe tools don't understand the syntax there. But I think it's good if you're looking for some acceptance test integration. The Developer Hub does have a way to wrap your current testing and start regression testing some of that way if you're trying to prevent that going forward. And then my last bit that I just wanted to touch on is just using Deque for resources. They have a lot of information about the European Accessibility Act, especially with that coming up. And all their webinars are free and on demand, so it's great resources. And then they also have a conference for accessibility. So AxeCon is their annual conference. You register for free, you get a ton of great talks, and you can keep up on some of this information. So I would highly recommend it if you're just looking to learn more about accessibility. And the topics range from legal to engineering. And so you can kind of find a little bit of anything for what you're looking for. So that is my part of this. I think I'm going to pass it over to Anton, who's going to give us a little bit of a code demo.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. Great content. So I have to check my website with X. But let's talk about how you can make your developer's life easier in terms of accessibility. And Toon mentioned that in the beginning, like, hey, imagine somebody who doesn't have a mouse or a keyboard access, right? And this is where the screen reader comes in. And Tanya also mentioned, like, hey, what if you get 200 errors in X, right? So you as a developer, you can do a lot of things. So you could go through every line of code and edit that and apply your changes, but this is, I would say, not that great, neither for you, neither for the client who has to pay you, right? So therefore, my recommendation is always macros, right? And this is a very, very simple macro for the screen reader only edition. And if we take a look at this button here, so I'm personally transitioned to working with macros, I think last year or the year before. So I have a lot of macros and I import them into a HubSpot module in this case. And basically what I do here, again, super simple screen reader macro. I'm importing it in a simple button. And one thing that I also recommend to do is create some sort of fallback, right? So in this example, it's like, since this is a button, you have the link, you have the actual button text or button label, and also the screen reader label or text. And if we take a look at the code, so we can ignore this demo output here, but what I like to do and what I recommend is creating this super simple fallback. It's just an unless statement. You can do this with an if statement as well. So unless the screen reader label is empty, use the screen reader label text as the screen reader variable. Otherwise, if it is empty, use the button text as the screen reader text. And how this looks in the real world, we have, for instance, the button text, let's say, click me, right? But for people who are working with a screen reader, click me is not that accessible, right? So you might want to say, hey, click this button to get access to X, right? So basically, I would say it's similar to an alt text with images, right? But for somebody who is not using the screen reader, this person will still see the button text, but somebody who is using the screen reader, he will get this whole text here, right? And yeah. So again, if you don't want to use it, you can leave this empty and the button text will be the screen reader label. So you always have a fallback, right? And if you should decide, hey, I want to put something in like click me again, click this button. Let's do it real quick for this demo, right? It's replacing this content, and if we it won't be visible, but if we would inspect the source code, you would see the difference. And also this is why I've just printing the screen reader value here, right? So again, my recommendation, apply macros wherever you can. And if you're not familiar with macros, we had a great developer hack about macros last year. So you should definitely check this out if you want to learn more about macros. And yeah, so if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I would say we will start the roundtable and Q&A.
Let's
Right.
do this, Anton. Thank you for that, and thank you for everyone who has presented thus far. everyone is coming up on stage. Tune, Brooke, I want to put you up here. There's Brooke and Tune. Come. There's my friend. All right, cool. We got everyone up here. I would start off by saying thank you again for all that you just did. I do also want to say that I will add this stuff to a GitHub repository, and any old viewer of the Developer Hug will know that I'm very bad at actually doing that. So new year, new me. I am going to actually fulfill my promise of doing that. It will be, let me see, I'm going to copy this and put it in the chat right now. Here is where all of the stuff will be at some point in time, probably tomorrow, but hold me to it. If it's not there, I need people actually to find me and yell at me. Okay, let's talk about things accessibility. And we already do have a question, so let's start there from Senior Care Health, Senior Care Growth. Will HubSpot Forms be updated to pass the Axe Dev Tool scan? I'm just going to go, Tanya. You hit that one. Talk to me. Yeah, that's right. On the spot.
I could take it if you don't want it.
Yeah, I think it might be closer to it. So yeah.
Okay, so right now the iframe mode for forms and the share page for forms as well are already accessible. I don't know exactly which WCAG level, but I already know that they are. I know that's not what you're excited about, though. What you're excited about, though, is you want the JavaScript version of those embed codes to be updated, to be accessible. The big challenge for us at HubSpot is, like, you're already using the forms, and the HTML and CSS is already on the page. And if you're clever, like, probably, I'm guessing Anton's done this before, maybe even soon, you might have even used some JavaScript to modify the form a bit. Yeah, so the problem is we can't automatically detect when you've chosen to do that and when you haven't. And also, if you wrote CSS that is what is causing it to be inaccessible, then that's also a separate problem. So, in the future, rolling out those updates to the non-iframe version of forms, it is on the table. It's just a very complex thing for our teams to avoid breaking existing sites. I don't have an exact timeline, unfortunately. They've been thinking about this for literal years, trying to come up with plans to make this happen. So wish I had more of a concrete answer. But
John, what I just heard from you just now was that Anton and Tune are both blocking the progress from HubSpot. All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I feel on that.
Marcus has a question, and this one can I say, Tanya? Can you take this one? What could be a typical thing that automatic tests are missing?
I would say a lot of like keyboard interactions and things like that. The automated tests kind of look through your HTML and kind of return what they can from your nodes against the WCAG. So they don't go through and actually, perform keyboard testing and making sure that it makes sense. So how can I put this? It does look at like tab focus and things like that. Like, do you have tab focus? And it kind of tries to guess, but if you like put yourself in a keyboard user's shoes, and you try to run through your page, there could be things that kind of come up and you're like, that's odd. Like it shouldn't flow like that. Or I can't actually close this like modal. Like, why is that? These are things that the automated tests are not going to catch, that you need to go through and kind of like test those components and click around and use your keyboard. And additionally, screen readers. I find that when you actually use a screen reader, they kind of tell you things about the page and what you're missing in terms of content and like the flow. And now go screen reader users, they're like power users, right? So they know how to use a screen reader. They have like little things that they do to move around quickly. They navigate to headers immediately. They have a rotor tool inside a screen reader where they can just kind of like get to all the links, like read me all the links on the page, read me all the headers on the page. And they use that to quickly navigate. And so I think like when you don't test with the screen reader manually, and know those kind of behaviors that a screen reader user might have, you kind of miss the opportunity to make sure that your content or some of those things are actually presented well for that type of assistive technology, if that makes sense.
For sure. But like, obviously, no, that's a hard thing to ask, everyone to go get a screen reader and actually go through this process. So what do you just generally suggest? I mean, what's your minimum viable on this?
So my minimum viable is that I use the screen reader built into the Mac, and I run through it that way. Unfortunately, that leaves a little bit to be desired because it is not the most used screen reader. JAWS and NVIDIA is the two that most folks use, and they behave differently. Every screen reader has like different little nuances to the way that they're used. So minimum viable, if you're on a Mac, use that. I think if you're on Windows, I believe you can download JAWS for free. It's been a long time since I've been on Windows. So I believe you could actually try to test with that.
So are you saying like these screeners are kind of like the good old days of browsers where everyone has like their own little technology and you had to kind of compensate for all of them? Or
yes, yeah, and there's actually, and to go back to DQ again, of course, but they actually have some great resources to show you, hey, if you do this, technique, if you're fixing this, this is what happens on JAWS. This is what happens on, your MacBook. This is what happens here, and they show you like the difference, like of how it actually speaks some of that out. So I would say like using DQ for that. I could find some resources to put inside of our like resource packet too.
That I will do for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good resource. So you just kind of like see like the differences. So that's MVP. If you really, really need to make sure, then I would do user testing. Like there's companies out there that you can go and request that somebody who uses screen reader run through your website and actually audit it and give you some of those issues. So that would be a good one.
Yeah. I just want to throw this up there. Sioux Falls Urgent Care put this out. VoiceOver on Mac is very forgiving. So you might, I would say probably will miss some issues that you won't see in other readers. Good call out there. I think Estron asked a question. Other than he wants ice cream presently. We have thoughts on third-party accessibility tools, i.e. UserWay, that automatically detect and solve issues on the rendered DOM for visitors. Anyone have any thoughts on that? I love that silence.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I haven't tested it, but I think if it doesn't really matter if it's third-party tools or if it's the code you're managing yourself, right? I think if you're making an effort to make your digital experience more accessible, then you're on the good path. So not a really concrete answer on UserWay itself, but I think the effort is the part that you want to look into.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think that's a great response. I'd also double down and say that. Oh, John, you were talking. Go ahead. You can talk, and I will say something smart later.
Hey, what I was going to call out is so what Anton's saying is correct in the sense of like any tools you can do to flag accessibility issues for yourself to be able to correct is going to be beneficial. The type of tool that I think is specifically called out here is I would refer to them as a one-stop shop script that you would load onto a page, and it's supposed to magically solve accessibility for you across the board. The way that I would best describe this situation is, in the best case scenario, it might be using AI, and AI magically fixes that page's accessibility. That's best case scenario. But now the person who's just used that page goes to the next page on that site. All of a sudden, the AI script ran again and generated the fixes differently than it did before. So now the way that the user is expecting the page to function and work. It's kind of like having, like, if you were to move the nav menu or something on a website, that might be a jarring experience for a sighted user. So I would say avoid the one-stop shop tools, but definitely if you can catch it in your code, so in your VS Code editor or Cursor. In fact, you can use Cursor rules to encourage, if you're using a lot of auto code completion, you can encourage it to have a habit of generating better accessible code.
Can I tack on here? I didn't want to go first because I don't want to go on a rant. But just to add on, when you look at accessibility tools like this, I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. A lot of them do try to come across as like this one-stop shop. Put this on your website, you'll be fine. That is absolutely not the case in most scenarios. You will find that it does not cover all use cases. You really, really do need to look at your website and do manual testing and making sure, especially, again, going back to the Accessibility Act in the EU, and you're like going to be held to these regulations. Putting that on your website and going with it is not going to solve the problem. So do not think of it as like a one-stop solution. And then the other thing that I want to talk about is some of the tools that they have to make accessible changes on your site. Color contrast, and some of them, text sizing, like these things are actually usually, if somebody has some kind of impairment, they have tools on their computer, they have settings, they have things they've already have set up to adjust color contrast, to make the text bigger. They might have a magnifying tool. There's like an application if you have a visual impairment to magnify the screen. And so like those kinds of tools, like in a plugin like that, are almost useless to them. Like they probably won't use it. They're going to use the tool that they're familiar with to adjust what they need on that page. So really, really getting down like deeper into the code and addressing like I said, screen reader issues where like content's just not accessible, and things like that are going to be way more important than some of those like superficial kind of like changes to the site that people are probably already handling on their own.
I obviously left for a moment, so I'm sure you guys said very, 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 very smart things without me here, and I thank you for that. We are coming up on time, but I'm curious. Does everyone have like maybe 5-ish more minutes, something like that? Because I don't want to get too deep into this, and it's possibly something that we should have another session on, and that is AI and accessibility. I don't have any like leading questions to this, and I'm hoping that everyone has some thoughts on where we are and what we need to start thinking about. I'm going to leave this to either John or Tanya to start it off, just because you all are much more in depth with this than we are.
So I can kick it off. One thing that's made a very big difference in the world of accessibility, both in the physical world and digital world, has been AI. And that's a good way to start this conversation is even to bring it back to, there is a tool that if you've never heard of it, it's an app for cell phones, both Android and iOS, that was called Be My Eyes. And Be My Eyes was a tool for someone who has visual impairments to request help from a volunteer who's also using the app to basically go, for example, like, hey, I need to color coordinate something, or I'm digging behind my computer trying to figure out which chord is which. Like, can you tell me which one is the one I'm looking for, or any of those kinds of problems that would come up on a regular basis that are ones that like are visual in nature. So that tool would allow a person to help the other person. Well, Be My Eyes has kind of evolved into Be My AIs because they now work with OpenAI's vision model. And so a lot of those tasks now the same users will use AI to answer their questions and figure out solutions. They might still use humans for something like, help me identify which clothing goes together. That's more of a subjective thing. A human's going to do a better job. But the cool part where this comes to the digital side is images. So I talked about alt text. Tanya talked about alt text. This is a weird point in time that we're at where alt text is still necessary, I think, but it's not necessary in the way that it used to be. So now these screen readers often will have AI tools baked in where the user can go, they see an image and they go, okay, the text description that the developer provided is garbage. It doesn't give me anything meaningful. They can literally tell the tool to describe the image to them and describe it at the depth level they want. But where the human side still matters is if you provide a good contextually relevant alt text. So what I was describing before about how our files tool has the ability for you to set alt text at that level versus at the page level. If you're providing that page level, like more narrow context that adds meaning and value, then they get the meaning out of it and they can still choose, hey, I want the more descriptive version. And one last thing on that. One really cool thing that they can do now with that tool is some of them, they can actually ask questions about the image itself. So they can get better depth on their own. I see Anton smiling. Do you have any thoughts?
I mean, I also see that, or I think that, as you've mentioned, the whole alt text might become somewhat obsolete in the next couple of years, right? But I mean, I wouldn't say that you should ignore it right now, right? And the thing why I was smiling was like, what? Let's just say it. We all know that the default alt text, if an alt text is even provided by any CMS, it's always the picture name or the image name. And I mean, I was smiling because I thought like, okay, is image 2987 v2 dash whatever? I mean, this is not a good alt text. We all know that. And the thing is like, will AI use something like this to provide a better result? Because if it will do, then I would say a majority of websites need a update, or at least all the images, right? And yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Tanya, I'm going to give you final words here, and then we are going to clear house. What do you say?
Oh, final words. Okay, sure. Yeah. On the AI topic or just generally? You want me to give
Oh
me
my
like
gosh. I mean,
PSA?
I do want to know what you have to say about. I also, anyone in the audience, if we should be doing an entire hug, developer hug event on this AI and accessibility, let us know. I'm very curious to know. But no, Tanya, just bring us out with whatever you think is the most important parting wisdom.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that folks can do, if you're watching this and you're starting to get into accessibility, or even if you have some slight experience, is really to continue learning, I know I like put up a bunch of resources and kind of, like I said, went to DQ. There's so many resources out there. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of nuance to this area. And so I think the best thing that you can do is to gain as much understanding as possible and do it in small increments because there's so much information. So start by learning level A of the WCAG. Those are usually pretty simple techniques that you can, start applying and that are understandable. And so I would start there, then raise yourself to, there are many different places. Go to AA, learn a tool that helps you, start attending webinars, things like that. So I think just gaining knowledge and just, from your foundation and building upon that is going to help you over time. And there's just a lot of great resources out there to do that. So please continue learning. And things change like AI in this space all the time. So it's just a continuation of that always.
I love it. So in the brilliant words from What About Bob, baby steps, I think is what we distill from that message. Cool. All right, everyone, thank you so very much. You are amazing. And I want everyone to guess where Tanya's top secret lab is. It's very, we all want to know. And have a great time. See you later.